Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And just want to start off this episode by thanking all of our loyal viewers as well as any first time viewers that we have here. My schedule is now getting a bit back to normal, so apologize that haven't seen as much of me over the last week or so, but some travel and some family obligations and some work obligations are concluded for the near to medium term at this point. So hopefully I will be putting videos out at a more stellar pace than I have over the past week and try to continue the momentum that we have in this series. And that momentum includes the fact that this Oakland A's franchise, which as we begin this 2030 season, despite having the lowest budget and the lowest player payroll in all of baseball, is the defending World Series champions. And the only owner goal that we have for this year is to reach the playoffs once again. Not going to be an easy task, as we noted at the end of last episode. The preseason predictions are not necessarily kind to us, suggesting that not only won't we make the playoffs this year, but we'll also slip back to a losing record for what would be the sixth time in 7 seasons at 80 and 82. I'm expecting better than that, but I do have to admit that in my heart of hearts, I do feel like this team isn't as good as the team that we had a year ago. Positively, as we talked about, that team won 94 games and won the World Series, so even if we're not quite as good, we could still certainly have a winning record and hopefully be a playoff team. And we are also finally getting to the point where we have some prospects that are not too far away. The top prospects list has been published, and we've got 5 top 100 prospects, including 3 top 50 prospects, led by Jake Ortega, the number 14 prospect in baseball, who we picked 3rd overall in the draft last year out of Oregon State. He will be starting the year in Double-A. The hope is that maybe we can promote him to Triple-A in the summer, and if things go really well, Mr. Ortega could be a September call-up for us. If things go very poorly with our current center fielder, Luis Lara, who does have some lingering injury issues and is fragile physically, we might need to bring up Ortega even before then, but hopefully it will not come to that. Arturo Estrada is the number 44 prospect in baseball, and after a couple of years in rookie ball, we're promoting the 18-year-old to Class A this year. He's hit over 300 each of his first 2 years in professional baseball. Conceivably could see him as a teenager in high A ball before the season finishes, if things go well and he stays healthy. Looking at our other top prospects, Bertrand Albrighton is a guy that we signed as an international amateur free agent several years ago at this point, back in 2026. He's been a bit stymied over the last 2.5 years since he first started playing professional games and we moved him from the international complex. He's soon to be 21 years old. He's the number 62 prospect in baseball. But when we look at his ratings, he looks like he should be competent at the Dominican League level that he's been at. But it still looks like he may struggle a tiny bit in A-ball, kind of below average at just about everything for that level. That said, we're hoping to just have him in the DSL for maybe a month or so this year, and then by early summer get him up to A-ball, and we're going to just have to start testing him at some point given his age. And then one other top 100 prospect that we have is Arturo Uresti, a guy who we signed as an international amateur free agent just a few months ago. Only 16 years old, although he'll be 17 soon. We are going to keep him in the international complex this year. I know those of you who are paying close attention will say to me, hey, old school, you said you had five top 100 prospects. You've only mentioned four. Well, that's because one of our top prospects is also a pitcher, and that's Jaheim Penniman, who we picked second overall in 2028, number 39 prospect in baseball. Split last year between rookie ball and A ball. Starting out this year, it is a young 20-year-old in A ball in the California League. Certainly would anticipate that we'll be promoting him to high A before the end of the year. And if things go really well, maybe he's playing double A ball late this season. So only one guy in double A right now, and that's, of course, Ortega. But with multiple guys in A ball and an opportunity to kind of get some of these guys into high A and perhaps even double A before the end of the season, we are finally nearing a point where we may have some help on the way from our farm system. And as I mentioned, center fielder Luis Lara banged up, but just day-to-day for the next day with an elbow contusion, so should not be something that becomes a lingering issue. Unfortunately, we do have one major lingering issue as the season begins, and that's the fact that our starting catcher, Drake Baldwin, is going to be out with a ruptured tendon in his finger. Definitely leaves us a little vulnerable behind Agustin Ramirez, who will be our starting catcher. MJ Melendez, the left-handed hitting catcher slash corner outfielder, is kind of our de facto backup. Unfortunately, we plan to play him as our DH against right-handed pitching, so that's going to wear him out a little bit. Tyler Soderstrom still has the ability, in theory, to play catcher, but not particularly well. You can see the rating is 25 out of 30, and his blocking and framing are both tragically bad. So in a pinch, it's not going to shock me if we end up having to play Soderstrom at catcher from time to time, which I don't love. We do have Tyler Stevenson, who we signed to a minor league deal down in AAA. He was kind of our last cut for the team. And if things just don't work out with Melendez, or honestly, if perhaps things don't work out with J.D. Davis doing well against left-handed pitching for us, it's conceivable that we could be bringing Stevenson up, which would give us somewhat more competence, at least defensively, in terms of our backup catcher. And with that as an introduction, it's time to get this 2030 season and our title defense underway. I do think when all is said and done, this team's going to have a winning record again. And I think that we'll be competing for a playoff spot. I'm not going to pound the table and guarantee it, but I think this team's going to be more competitive once again than the experts are expecting. And our A's are off to a 3-1 start, but we got there in an ugly way, lost 11-0 on opening day as we begin defense of our World Series title at home. Shut out 11-0 on a two-hitter, as I mentioned, and our ace, Jackson Ferris, new addition, Hunter Brown, and reliever Duncan Marston, the rookie who's come up through our farm system, all had pretty ugly performances, although I will say that Hunter Brown and Marston in 3 1/3 innings of work did combine for 9 strikeouts, so they were definitely dealing. They were just also dealing a lot of hits, allowing 8 hits over those 3 1/3 innings. So ugly start to the season for us on opening day, but we are 3-1. Colt Keith helped bounce us back with a 3-home run game in a 10-2 win over the Angels, and you can see 4 games into the season, he's hitting .357 with 5 homers and 9 runs driven in. Well, things have turned uglier quickly with 3 straight losses at home to the Rangers, which puts us below 500. More importantly than that, have some injury issues. Not the end of the world yet, but Mason Miller, day to day with a tired arm, going to impact him for about a week. He's off to a good start despite the 0-1 record, has a 1.69 ERA in 10 and 2/3 innings pitched over his first 2 starts. So, not going to put him on the IL, but certainly going to ensure that we skip his next start to hopefully get him healthy, since that tired arm is having a substantial impact on his throwing. Given that he's already fragile, that's not something that we're going to mess with. And speaking of injuries, just got an even more significant report. Chase DeLauder, last year's ALCS and World Series MVP, off to a slow start this year, hitting just a $176 in his first 5 games. Going to be out for 8 weeks with a partially torn labrum. So that, along with the loss of Baldwin, are certainly a couple of pretty significant hits to our offense here in the early going of this season. And our pickings were a little slim as far as a replacement for Mr. DeLauder. Unfortunately, Tyler Stevenson is banged up for about a week. He would have been an obvious guy to consider bringing up. Instead, we brought up Matt Wallner, the veteran outfielder who we signed as a minor league free agent a little over a month ago. He had been productive in AAA, 318 average, 5 homers, 18 ribbies. Does look like a guy who's got a little bit of pop in his bat against right-handed pitching, and not expecting him to be Chase DeLauder for us, but if he can be functional offensively for the next month or two, that would certainly be very helpful. And we've made it to May 1st. After kind of a meh start, the team has caught fire of late, won our last 5 games, pushing our record to 15-9 as we get to the month of May. Taking a look at the standings, we're up 2.5 games on both the Mariners and the Angels in the American League West. Last year's AL batting champion Tyler Soderstrom is not leading the league in batting this year, but tied for the league lead in home runs, leading the league in ribbies, and second in OPS at this early stage of the season. And the batting average is still .344, so he has been very productive for us, especially of late. Taking a look at the pitching leaders, Chase Lee, our, at this time, I don't want to say long-time closer, but the guy who's been our closer for the last several seasons, 10 saves in 12 games pitched and a 0.75 earned run average on the season for the 31-year-old closer. And taking a look at team statistics a month into the season, we've gotten a little bit lucky this year, 1 game better than Pythagorean expectations, but only 24 games in, still a small sample size. Second in the league in runs scored. The pitching, not what it's historically been, though. 11th in the league in runs allowed. Interestingly, our starters are 6th, but the bullpen, which was pretty strong last year, is 11th in ERA at this point. Hopefully that will get better. One positive thing is that our defense, as it was last year, still very good. 1st in the league in defensive efficiency and 3rd in zone rating 1 month into the year. We've also made some strides against left-handed pitching, admittedly a small sample size of just 6 games, but last year the one weakness, or I guess we had more than one weakness, the most significant weakness that I think I identified with this team as we were heading into this year was that we had a losing record against lefty pitchers last year. Made a couple additions that we thought would help with that. J.D. Davis and M.J. Melendez, as we've talked about, who we signed to minor league contracts and ended up making the team. Also made the trade for the young outfielder, Mr. Gonzalez, who we thought could help us as well. And we are 6-0 against left-handed starting pitching. Might as well check in and see how those players are doing. Ooh, not good news here. Brian Rincon has been day-to-day for a while, but Cameron Cawley, injured, diagnosis pending, and he is fragile physically. Having a really nice year for us, too, hitting 373. Seems like anytime anything good happens in Cawley's career, though, he ends up getting banged up. He has missed significant time every year of his major league career, and something negative could be coming soon. Thinking about some of the guys who we thought could help us against left-handed pitching, and I guess I misspoke. Melendez really wasn't one of those guys, but J.D. Davis, one who made the team, and he's hitting 340 with 2 homers and 11 ribbies and 47 at-bats. So he has certainly helped us. Willie Adames, guy who's starting against left-handed pitching, hitting 333 with 1 homer and 2 ribbies in 30 at-bats for him, 119 WRC plus. And then the other addition to help us against lefties was Gabriel Gonzalez. He's only hitting 271, only a 76 WRC plus. Another guy with a relatively small sample size, just 48 at-bats. But unlike both Adames and Davis, the other 2 new right-handed hitting additions to the team, Gonzalez has been a below-average offensive player for us this year, despite that 6-0 start for us against southpaw starters. And as we head into mid-May, some good news. Cameron Cawley, despite his fragility, it was just a day-to-day issue, so he's back and healthy from that. Unfortunately, the month of May got off to a really rough start. We lost 7 of our first 8 games during the month before salvaging these last 2 games at home against Baltimore to win that series. The rest of the month we're home against Houston, then on the road against the Yankees, the Red Sox, and the Blue Jays in a trip through the Northeast. And then we finish off home against Seattle, and then the final day of the month, the beginning of a weekend homestand on Friday against the Diamondbacks. And some bad injury news for the A's. Chase DeLauder, who we thought was within 2 or 3 weeks of coming back, is now going to be out for another 4 months, and he's going to need surgery on that partially torn labrum. So that likely is going to cost him just about the entire season. The hope would be that if we are competing for a playoff spot in September, maybe he'll be back to join us at some time late in the season. Right now, 22-20 though, so we'll be on the periphery of potentially competing for a playoff spot. We are a game and a half behind the Mariners, tied with the Astros for second in the AL West, and half a game out of the final wild card spot in the AL as we sit here on May 22nd. Looking at the leaderboard, Colt Keith hitting 288, 12 homers, 36 ribbies, is third in the American League. And Chase Lee still saving a lot of games, although he's slipped down to second in the AL with 14 here through the first close to 2 months of the season. And with the better play, though, our fan interest has popped up a couple of points this season to 51. We had been thinking that the minimal fan loyalty might have been influence on keeping that fan interest below 50, but apparently that hypothesis may very well have been incorrect. If that hypothesis wasn't incorrect, perhaps, although we can't see it here, maybe our fan loyalty is creeping slowly higher, but certainly positive that a little more fan interest. We've got about, actually not too many, we've only got a few extra people, less than 100 extra people in the seats this year compared to last year. Revenue up close to 5%, though, with the modest increase in ticket prices. Hopefully, if this team continues winning more often than we lose and hopefully improves the winning percentage going forward, we can continue to make a little bit of progress on the financial aspects of this game as well, which is ultimately going to be critical to whether or not we can build something somewhat sustainable on a relatively shoestring budget here in Oakland. And we've made it to the month of June. Unfortunately, May was a real ugly month for our Oakland A's, and we sit here at 25-26 with a losing record 2 months into the season. Only 3.5 games behind in the division, only a game and a half out of the final wild card spot, so we're certainly still in the playoff mix, but has been a bit of a disappointing start for our Oakland Athletics here in the 2030 season. One thing that is positive, left fielder Jake Ortega, the third pick in last year's draft, has proven himself in the first 2 months at Double-A. 285 average, 10 homers, 42 ribbies, got 5 doubles, 4 triples, 140 WRC plus, and certainly his ratings for Double-A have improved dramatically just over the course of the last 2 months. Doesn't look like he's going to be dominant in the PCL. So we're going to just take a look at the coaching. He's going to be up in the PCL in a month at the longest, assuming he doesn't get hurt. But if he's got a great relationship with our coaches in Double-A compared to what he'll have in Triple-A, we may keep him at this Double-A level for just another month to hopefully continue the strong boosts that we've had with his abilities thus far. If it looks like the coaching is better and the potential relationships are better at Triple-A, we might just promote him right now, even if it looks like he may not be quite as dominant at that level as he has been in Double-A for us. So we'll take a look at our personnel and try to figure that out, taking a look at our manager, Willie Concepcion, and how he is getting along with players. And he's only got an average relationship with Mr. Ortega. Now, he is excellent at both development and mechanics, so that certainly perhaps works in the favor of keeping him down a little bit longer, since he does seem to be progressing well at this level. Taking a look at our hitting coach, Edgar Gonzalez, he also, actually, he has a fair relationship only with Mr. Ortega. Good with development, good with mechanics, excellent in hitting. So very competent coaches, but they're not necessarily great in terms of their relationships with Ortega. So maybe it is time to move him up. We'll see what those relationships are going to look like at the AAA level. And we think he'd have a good relationship with the manager, so that's better. And Scott Patton is excellent with development and outstanding with mechanics, so certainly someone who seems like he could help positively influence Ortega's career. And our hitting coach at that level, Tiger Peterson, expected to be one notch better in his relationship, even though it's only average, than the AAA or the Double-A hitting coach. And he's good with development, good with mechanics, excellent with teaching hitting. So I think on the margin, we could argue that it makes sense to bring him up. He's got a little bit better relationship with the manager, a little bit better relationship with the with the hitting coach. The hitting coaches, in terms of their abilities, are pretty similar. Could argue that maybe even the manager at AAA is a little better in terms of development. Not a lot left for Mr. Ortega to prove at Double-A, so we're actually going to go ahead and promote him to AAA less than 11 months after we picked him 3rd overall in the draft. And that 10-17 month of May was pretty brutal. We are actually now a game worse than expectations, so got a little bit unlucky during the month. 6th in the league in runs scored, still 12th in the league in runs allowed, and you can see the bullpen ERA getting better in terms of rankings, but the starters' ERA getting worse, and our zone rating really deteriorated a lot over that last month. So definitely seems like there are some things that we're going to want to try to improve with this team. I also had a losing record against lefties in the month of May, with a 3-5 record against lefties in May after that 6-0 record against the left-handed starters in April. And with the team still struggling, having lost our first game in June, figured we would just give team chemistry a look, and things are actually happy. Willie Adames doing pretty good in the clubhouse. 2 captain personalities, a couple of leaders with Rincon and Marsden. Good relationships with the manager, with most people. One thing that has developed, which is disappointing, Bubba Chandler's last year's Cy Young Award winner has become a selfish player in terms of his personality, and a few negative personality traits seem to be emerging. I don't think his personality has historically been that negative, so that's not positive. Also not positive that he's 2-7 with a 4.60 ERA. So after, I don't want to call it a brilliant performance, but a really nice season ago that, as we talked about, ended up in both a Cy Young Award and a World Series championship. He's kind of regressing this year to be more the type of pitcher that he has historically been for us, which is okay, but not great. Speaking of okay, but not great, Tyler Soderstrom and Colt Keith both having good, solid years, but both definitely not performing quite at the level that they did a year ago. Matt Wallner has certainly not been the answer. We've given him a decent shot now, replacing DeLauder for well over a month, and he's hitting just $168 and 125 at-bats. So probably time to try to get a different solution there, and see if maybe we can do a little bit to try to jumpstart this offense. And Mr. Wallner, despite his poor performance, would not accept a demotion to AAA, so we traded him away for a 4A guy just to ensure that we got the salary off of our books, and we got a very small amount of money in return. I guess I can show you the trade rather than just talking about it. We got $145,000 in cash, and Ariel Almonte, who's not on a major league contract, assigned him into AA. He had actually been pretty effective in AAA, but we got a pretty solid AAA team, and we do have an opening in AA now with the recent promotion of Jake Ortega to AAA. So helps us a little bit financially. And then to fill that roster spot, we have brought up a guy that we picked up this past off season who had started the year for us in AAA, and that is Diane Jorge. Got him a little more versatile defensively down there. He played a little bit of left field for us and also rounded out his skill at third base, and did hit 289 down there, 9 homers and 11 doubles and 194 at-bats. Certainly not expecting that type of gap power or home run power from him at the major league level, but with above average contact, above average eye, and the fact that he's versatile defensively, hoping that he can at least be more respectable at the plate than what Wallner had done for us, and start seeing if maybe Mr. Jorge may become a more significant part of our future. He's going to be playing left field against both righties and lefties. As I oftentimes say, that's probably not an optimal situation for us, but we're dealing with the injury to DeLauder, and we're still down a catcher with Drake Baldwin likely out until around the All-Star break, trying to recover from that ruptured tendon in his finger. So things not going great for Oakland, but they certainly haven't been a disaster either. Not that that's great when that's the best thing we can say, but it is what it is as we sit here on June 2nd. And while we're messing with our roster, we're also going to make one other move. Mitch Keller had been our number 5 starter. Not good. 1-4 record with a 6.61 ERA, 8 home runs allowed, and 21 walks allowed in 47 and 2/3 innings. Joe Rock, the left-hander, who we had picked up as a minor league free agent signing with a major league option over the winter, has been very good as a setup man for us. 3-1 record with a 1.12 ERA over an admittedly small sample size of 16 innings. Has given up 7 walks in that time, so he certainly hasn't been perfect. But hard to imagine that he's going to be significantly worse than the performance we had been getting out of Keller as our number 6 starter. And if you've been looking closely, you can see we've got a lot of mediocre to slightly above average ERAs in terms of our rotation this year. But the bullpen outside of Chase Lee, Emmett Sheehan, and Duncan Marston has pretty much universally been bad, with everybody else having ERAs well above 5. I guess Rock also qualifies as not being bad, and as we've talked about, we've now moved him into the rotation. And unfortunately, as we get to mid-June, this team is still really struggling. Only 4 wins in the month of June for us. We had a 4-game losing streak, then we won 3 out of 4, then another 4-game losing streak, and lost 2 in a row following our most recent victory. We've got a homestand coming up against the Astros and the Angels before finishing up the month on the road in San Diego and then at the White Sox. But taking a look at the standings, and we are sinking like a stone, 10.5 behind, tied for 3rd with the Rangers, behind the Mariners in the AL West. And even in terms of the wild card, we've slipped to 5 behind. So hopefully we can play better over this next couple of weeks before we get to July. Taking a look at the injured list, you can see it's gotten quite big as far as our minor leagues, which is not great. Drake Baldwin only 3 weeks away from a potential return, so hopefully we'll have him back around the All-Star break. That will certainly be a boost defensively, which should help our pitching staff. And the hope would certainly be that he would help offensively as well. Not expecting to see Chase DeLauder until late September, unfortunately. So we're going to have to figure out a way to hold this thing together with duct tape and bubble gum and maybe a little bit of spit. But right now this title defense is not going particularly well for the A's. And unfortunately, the last couple months of June weren't much better than the first couple weeks. Not months of June. The last 2 weeks of June were not much better than the first couple weeks of June. A 5-7 record for us in our final 12 games. So as we sit here on July 1st, closing in on the midway point of this season, we are 34-44. Having just a really rough season, alone in 4th place now in the division, 13 behind. We're now 9.5 out of a wild card, so really struggling. Taking a look at team statistics here for this team, and runs scored, we're not good, 10th. Runs allowed, also not good, 10th. Our record in June, 9-18, was even worse than that really rough May that we've had. We are 4 games below Pythagorean expectations, so we should, in theory, be muddling along at just about a 500 team. Unfortunately, that's not what we're actually doing, 10 games below 500, and it's starting to show up in attendance where our attendance is down now about 2,500 from a year ago. We're generating less revenue, hanging out at 52 fan interest, which is slightly positive, but not making a ton of progress with this team as we sit here on July 1st, 5 days away from Baldwin potentially being able to begin a rehab assignment, so that's very positive. DeLauder 2 to 3 months away, so still expecting unlikely to see him until mid-September. So there's not necessarily, outside of Baldwin, any immediate help coming. Take a quick look at our good friend Jake Ortega and how he's been doing in his introduction to AAA. And he's been holding his own. 286 average, 2 homers, 2 doubles, and 49 at-bats. So the extra base hits aren't coming quite as easy as they did in AAA. Overall, a 91 WRC plus. So he has not embarrassed himself, but certainly not showing that he's necessarily ready to go up to the majors quite yet. His BABIPs this year of 364 and 375 at the AA and AAA levels have been pretty impressive and not necessarily sustainable either. And with that, we will call it an episode. Next time around, we will get to the midpoint of the season and do our full mid-year review as we start trying to figure out what levers we might be able to press to improve this team as we close in on the trade deadline a month from now. Don't have a ton of money to take on contracts unless we decide that we want to sacrifice our investments in scouting and player development, which for the long term probably don't make a ton of sense. We'll also, after we do the mid-year review, set ourselves up for the draft by the end of the next episode as well. We do have those supplemental first and second round picks this upcoming year for the qualifying offers that we made last offseason to Kyle Bradish and Nick Lodolo. So those will bolster us a bit, but we're going to be picking much later than we have become accustomed to, not picking until 32nd in the first round this year. And then, as I mentioned, we will have a supplemental pick, which looks like it will be 43rd overall after that. Then we'll be picking towards the end of the second round. And we've got the compensatory pick even later in the second round than the pick that we earned last year. So 4 picks in the first 2 rounds will be coming up for us, but they'll be much later than we've historically been picking. The problem is that at 34 and 44, it's not inconceivable that we'll be picking near the top of the draft again next year, which, given that we are in the final year of our contract, may not be an optimal performance on the field for us. But still think there's some things we can do to hopefully salvage this season, and getting our starting catcher back hopefully within the next week and a half or so after he does a brief rehab assignment will hopefully be an important step in the direction of getting this team back to 500 and hopefully competing for a winning record and maybe even a playoff spot as we get into September. And we'll find out how we do over the next week and a half of game time as we approach the draft in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.